say this. The reason I'm outside is to demonstrate the level of the lack of respect I have for the Michigan Wolverines. I don't even need to be in my studio. I can break this all down, anywhere I'm at. So no, in all due reality, if you watched the show yesterday, Des, and you listen to me year round, so you know that I am less of a homer than many of the people on the Michigan channel think, but I embrace it when I'm on here. I think when you said that you can't see a scenario where Michigan scores less 14 points or less, I think you're probably right. But at the same time, I don't think Iowa State's offense is that bad. Is Michigan's offense that much better than Iowa State's offense? Iowa State has one of the best wide receivers in the country. Granted, they lose Breece Hall. They lost Brock Purdy. I'm not by any means saying that Michigan's offense isn't better. It is. But Iowa held Iowa State to 10. And, that was a game that Iowa probably should have won. If you don't fumble on the goal line, you probably win that game. So I don't think the magic number is 14. I think it's probably closer to 20. If Iowa can create 10 points defensively, I know that sounds ridiculous that we're putting that on a defense. But if you can create 10 points defensively, and let's add in special teams. If they can get,
oh, God, here we go again.
They blocked 2 points.
I love how you segments from last December's show. And
exactly.
I just think it's funny.
Here we go again. Go ahead, Corey. Please.
I think it's funny we have 3 college football analysts, including Mark Rogers, on here, and y'all just shut down the importance of 2 of the 3 units in football. I understand Iowa's offense sucks. That's not new to anybody. But special teams and defense is part of the game, and I have people laughing, oh, it's going to be a boring game. Well, sure, it's going to be a boring game. They have won a lot of games this way. So I'm not saying they're going to win Saturday, but I'm just saying Michigan fans or whoever you're playing on a weekly basis, don't be surprised when Iowa gets you the ugly, old-fashioned way. Because if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Iowa. And they do it regularly.
More entertaining to listen to you 3 talk.
Ugly
so I'm only going to make one more statement. You don't need to hear anything else out of me because I want to kick back and listen to you 3 for the next 15 minutes. I will make this one statement. I am contemplating an Iowa win. I am considering predicting Iowa to outright win the game.
Of course, a Buckeye would say that, but I respect you, Mark.
Well, here's my thing. I would say that Michigan special team. I mean, I believe, and maybe I'm mistaken, but Michigan special teams coordinator just had an article written about him about how high level the Michigan special teams have been performing. Now, I do understand one punt block. Literally, it takes one guy to mess up and screw up his job. But I just yes, you have mentioned Iowa has won a lot of games like this, but have they won those games against a team as talented as Michigan?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not convinced of that. I'm talking the recent history. If we want to go back to 2016 and those things, great.
That's not recent history. The last 5 years isn't the last 5 years.
I'm talking the guys who were on the football team when that game was played. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. But guess what? Iowa football has stayed the same over the last 23 years. So regardless of personnel, they win the same way year in and year out. All I'm saying is, again, I want to make this clear. I am not predicting an Iowa win. I'll make my pick tomorrow and release it on my channel. But I'm just saying, Des, Iowa, you've seen the numbers out there. I saw Fox Sports tweeted it out today. They have won 4 of the last 5 contests in Kinnick against top 5 teams. That's an unbelievable number when you consider how Iowa plays. This is not Alabama. If there was a stat like that for Alabama, sure. We're talking Iowa winning against top 5 teams 4 of the last 5 times. And the one game, let's throw it over to Mark for a second. You know what the one game they lost was, Mark Rogers, against the top 5 team in the last how many years?
You said in the last how many years? So I'm guessing it was the game that Trace McSorley threw the touchdown in the back of the end zone with 1 second left.
They lost on the last play of the game against Penn State in 2017. So my point is, it could easily be 5-0 against top 5 teams in the last however many years. The last 5, I don't know where that stretches back to. I'm guessing that goes at least a decade back. So we've seen Giants fall. Michigan's experienced it in 2019. I do think this is a better Michigan team. I think you guys would agree with that as well. I don't think this is the 2016 Michigan team that's starting. Who's the guy that started that game that got hurt?
Wilton Speight.
Yeah.
So,
this is
hold
not.
on. Now, Corey, I will say this. Now, and to get to the nuts and bolts of it, like, I don't know if you heard this earlier. I did say that I actually give Iowa a better chance to beat Michigan this Saturday than I did in a Big Ten title game, because this is a different Michigan team. This is a Michigan team that is we're still trying to find out what they are. I think their defense is not as good as they were last year. Definitely don't have the disruptors they had last year. Now, against the Iowa offense, they probably don't have to be nearly as disruptive, because Iowa's offense is going to disrupt themselves. But, I'm sorry, I couldn't help it. But, in terms of the Iowa defense, look, we have a first-time starter on the road in J.J. McCarthy, versus an Iowa defense that is really good at converting, not only getting turnovers, but converting them to scoring opportunities. So, look, I do believe there's a formula for Iowa to win a football game. Now, I do understand the importance of special teams. I'm not looking at a block punt here or, the ball going off a Michigan player's face mask like Maryland. But I do believe that if you guys can force J.J. McCarthy in third and long situations where he has to feel the pressure to convert a play and not be willing to be patient throughout the course of the game, there is a chance that you can turn over this kid and put Michigan in a bind. So there is, I'm not counting you guys out at all. I definitely give you a better chance Saturday compared to last year.
But Dre, let me say this: when you say, you think there's a better chance that Iowa wins this year than you thought last year, that's like saying is velvet soft. Like the game last year was being played in Indy. I think that's what I'm saying. I think everybody in the country still, despite the reputation that they've built and the data represents it, I don't think people realize the home field advantage of Kinnick. And so there is no comparison last year, regardless of personnel. They have proven that 12th man is unlike many. I'm not gonna say like any, because I've never been to Baton Rouge and I've never been to a whiteout at Penn State. But yeah, you're right. I'm agreeing with you. But there's no question Iowa's got a better shot, and I don't see any way this.
So you're saying that based on what you were saying, you're saying that if Michigan play Iowa, let's say in weird universe, the Big Ten championship was at Kinnick, you think Iowa would have won that football game even after knowing what both teams were last year?
I think it would have been a much closer game. I don't know what the score would have been. Are we denying that it wouldn't have been a much closer game?
Well, potentially. I mean,
come on. Hey, listen. When's
Iowa was not scoring more than 3 points. It doesn't matter where they played.
Des, back me up here. Now, Corey might not know this. I give immense respect to playing at Kinnick. I've been saying that since the summer. This was always the game that I circled on the schedule for Michigan, and I said it was going to be a legitimate chance to potentially lose or be an extreme test for this football team. So by no means am I going into this game with 100% certainty that Michigan is going to win. However, I do know that similar to last year, there has to be things have to go Iowa's way. It's not going to be just position to position. Iowa's going to win that battle. I'm sorry.
I understand, but I'm just saying right now, it's very rare that teams go into Kinnick and blow them out. Here's an advantage that Michigan has. This new deal with Fox, not the new deal, but the new deal with Fox really helps Michigan because this game is being played at 11. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'm thrilled to death it's not a night game. That's the worst case scenario. You do not want you don't want a night game at 7 o'clock in Kinnick on ABC, because that has traditionally been the time slot and the game that Iowa tends to beat opponents. I will say this, Iowa did get their tails handed to them in what was that? Late October last year against Purdue at home. Now Purdue, I think Purdue, we've talked about this many times on the Iowa show. Purdue has a system and an head coach that understands how to attack Iowa. I don't think, like Jim Harbaugh, they obviously won thoroughly last year, but I wouldn't venture to say that I'm convinced that they have a head coach who can exploit Iowa the way Jeff Brom has and does.
I would make an argument they could. I think the play calling this year has been different than other years as far as being aggressive, throwing the ball downfield. I think that the wideouts for Michigan are better than the wideouts for Purdue. Maybe sans David Bell. He was really, really special.
David Bell's really
But I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but we're not talking about playing Clemson in Death Valley. Like this is not.
But you guys, when you beat Ohio State a few years ago, that was in a day. I'm pretty sure that was in the daytime. So I mean, look, I see what you're saying about the game being at night. By all means, that is an incredible atmosphere. But I think even what the Penn State game last year wasn't that a 3 later start. I know it probably turned into a night game eventually, but I think that was a 3:30 start, if I'm not mistaken, the Penn State game last year. But anyway,
I think it was I think it was a 3 o'clock. Kind of a weird time to start. I understand, and you know, Des, you say, well, it's not like going to Clemson and Death Valley. I would say that, you know, without going to Clemson, I know you've never been to Kinnick. I wouldn't venture to say that Death Valley is any more raucous or tough to play than Kinnick. The teams are certainly different, right? That's a much more talented Clemson team year in and year out. But I tell you, you put the talent of a Clemson and Kinnick, that's going to be hard. And we got to remember too, a lot of these wins, and I know Michigan fans will laugh at this, that we're talking about renovation in light of previewing this game, but a lot of those wins Iowa had in Kinnick over top 5 teams for the past 5. I don't know how many came since they renovated that north end zone, but it's worse. And you probably watched the Penn State game last year because it was like a 2 versus 3 game. And we know Taquan Roberson had problems even hearing his, communicating with his offensive line. Had like 4 false starts down that north end zone. That is a factor. We saw it at South Dakota State earlier this year. You can't hear your calls. And J.J. McCarthy is a young guy. He's never played in this type of environment. He certainly has never started in this type of environment. Does he have the tendency to take unnecessary risks? I guess that's a better question for you guys. But I released it on my preview here earlier this afternoon. My biggest key to this game is, first of all, Iowa is down 2 of its better corners right now. I'm not saying they're 2 best, but 2 of their better corners right now in Brendan Diaz-Fernandez and Terry Roberts. Roberts may end up playing, but he's not listed on the depth chart. If both of those guys are out, then you're down to Riley Moss and Cooper DeJean, both of which have proven to be vulnerable at times. But Riley Moss won Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year last year, and Cooper DeJean has the lead in the Big Ten for interceptions so far this year. So those are good corners. But my point is, with the lack of depth, I would not be surprised, Des, if Jim Harbaugh attacks Iowa exactly how you kind of implied he might, using those wideouts, because the skill position talent at Michigan, especially out wide, at least from my perception, is better than it was last year, maybe better than it has been in years. So that's a fascinating story. And the way I described it on my preview is Iowa might inadvertently, through injury, bait Jim Harbaugh to take unnecessary risk. I really do believe the key to this game is Jim Harbaugh playing conservative, like resisting the urge to take unnecessary risks. There's no reason to take unnecessary risks. Michigan should be able to go up, dominate the line of scrimmage, and win the football game. The only way they lose is if they turn the ball over. So there's no reason to take unnecessary risks. Do you take a shot here or there? Maybe. But boy, I'd be very, very calculated with a young quarterback in Kinnick against this defense. Even if you think there's a play there that can be had that can beat a Riley Moss or a Cooper DeJean. Play it safe, play it conservative. And as you talked about earlier, there's no way Iowa's going to score a ton of points on this Michigan defense. So, and let's be honest, Iowa's offensive line hasn't been very good anyway. So I doubt that Iowa is going to be able to run the ball for, I'll be surprised if they run it for more than 120, 130 yards because they haven't been doing that consistently against much more inferior competition. So I think I think Harbaugh, that's going to be the key. Will he be baited into taking deep shots down the field, which could be risky?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of Harbaugh. I think it's a matter because Harbaugh is very clear that there's a certain formula that he has to the way he wants to win a football game, no matter really what his personnel is. I mean, like as great as I think diverse and widespread his talent is in the receiving room, he still has not quite, I think, utilized them in the best way he can. He still typically likes, especially when the team is kind of, slowly muddling through a game, when all else fails, he will run it down your throat 15 times in a row if he has to. Like, at the end of the day, Harbaugh wants to run the football, stay ahead of the schedule, TOP, avoid turnovers, and wear you down. That's what he wants to do. And, you know, I think even though JJ is a slightly different style than K. McNamara, not slightly, he is a different style. In terms of the play calling sequence, Harbaugh's going to make sure that he's not putting JJ in any compromising situations.
Sure. I would. Let me hop in real quick. Sorry, I just want to acknowledge the super chat. Erica Goldberg, thank you so much. It says, no one is saying that's an easy win for us. We're saying that we have a chance and that people should not underestimate our D's ability, especially at home. And we have a second one from John Buckeye. Thanks so much. It says, Erica, here's $10 for your 5. Good show of support for your team, but I tell my wife, I love my dog, but that doesn't mean I think he should win the Westminster. Haha. All right. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Corey.
No, I see Bryant's comment, this last comment from Bryant in the chat. Mm-hmm. The problem with playing conservative is that it's playing not to lose. Man, I tell you, Kirk has won a lot of games playing not to lose over the years, and that's without as dominant of an offensive line as people perceive it to be year in and year out. So I don't. Again, I just think with this, and let's be honest, everybody's talking about the Michigan defense. Against the Iowa defense. I think the Michigan defense is probably a top 10 defense in the country right now, right?
No. I
mean,
can't say that yet.
They struggled against Maryland, but I'm talking personnel-wise.
Well,
I mean, you can make an argument. They definitely have some pieces. What do you think? I mean, is Iowa just gonna just take the air out of the ball on offense? Like, what do you think? How do you think Iowa's going to try to attack Michigan?
Well,
offensively,
you do remember last year, despite the blowout, that early in that game, Iowa had a chance to make a statement with that halfback pass. Guy was wide open in the end zone. It was wide open in the end zone. Should have been a touchdown. I think it was poorly conceived, given the fact that it was a fullback on the receiving end of that over his shoulder. I think it's a good idea, but poorly constructed. But I think we can acknowledge, and Michigan fans won't agree with this, but had that pass happen, you never know how the game changes. Again, not saying they would have won, but I think that changes the complexion of the game at that point. Because, again, Iowa's defense is the only way Michigan wins this game in a blowout is, I believe, is if Iowa falls behind early. Like, if this game's close at halftime, I think it's close in the fourth quarter. Eventually, we saw it last year in the Big Ten championship game. You get to that third quarter and you're down 2 scores and you're doing everything you can to keep a sputtering offense alive. Eventually, the dam's going to break, and that's exactly what happened. But I just think, to me, if you're the Iowa offense, you better come up with, I won't use the word exotics because people got mad at me. But hey, listen, yes. I think that is a football term, just for the record.
Yes, you are correct. You are correct.
I would be coming up with, I won't call them trick plays, but something that Michigan hasn't seen before. And, I had talked about earlier this week on my show, maybe Cooper DeJean in the Wildcat. That won't happen this week. But it's an idea for the future. It's something that I wish Iowa had implemented before the season started, maybe having a few plays available for a guy like that. They're down Keegan Johnson again. So that's their best deep threat right there. So I don't know how you get the ball downfield unless it's through an exotic. And, maybe you're able to knock off a big run here or there. Caleb Johnson is a guy who's knocked off a couple against Nevada, but that is Nevada. And they had some decent action in the run game last week against Rutgers, which is a good defense. I think it's a top 50 defense, but I would venture to say Michigan is much more talented. And by the end of the year, they'll be much better in total defense. So I just come back to the trenches. Blake Corum is going to be, as long as Michigan takes care of the ball, Blake Corum should be able to total enough yardage to where they beat Iowa in the run game. And the numbers over the course of the last 20 years in the Big Ten indicate that it's less important to meet a secret or a specific mark in rush offense. It's more important to beat your opponent in rush offense. So as long as Michigan beats Iowa in rush offense, and boy, at this point, I don't know how you could argue they won't. Turnovers are the only thing that can change the game. So I hate to act like this. I just don't see how Iowa moves the ball consistently in any fashion against the Michigan defense. But it's not exclusive to you guys. I said the same thing against Rutgers, and they struggled to move the ball against Rutgers. They were a little bit better than I thought. But as you brought up at the outset, Heck, 14 of the points they scored, 27 total, were on defense. So this is how Iowa's going to win. Now, they do have a tendency to do this in big games, and they do it year after year. So never say never, but I have a hard time seeing Iowa's offense doing much.
Especially back-to-back weeks, you know. I mean, you get 2 defensive touchdowns. It's rare you see a team get multiple defensive touchdowns back-to-back weeks. I mean, that's pretty incredible. So I'm not saying they won't do it again this year, but the odds of doing that on Saturday, really unlikely. So, I mean, look, like I said, man, you know, I definitely give Iowa a puncher's chance on Saturday. And J.J. McCarthy's a wild card in the situation. We don't know what he's going to do. He has the ability to light you guys up, but he definitely has the tendency to potentially make a mistake that keeps you in the game or gives you that juice and energy that you're talking about, Corey. So, you know, I would definitely say Hawkeye fans have a reason to – they definitely shouldn't show up to Kinnick with the idea of there's no way we can win this football game. There's absolutely a way they can win this football game. And if Michigan is not careful, they can find themselves in a dogfight late.
Let me say this, and then I gotta run here. But so I know this is not going to happen, and I understand this is probably not the coach's way of going about things. But if there's any game left on the schedule, and I'm Jim Harbaugh thinking, I want to give. I'm not. Again, I don't think they'll do this, but I want to give Cade one more game. It'd be this game.
Oh, he's banged up. He's hurt. Okay.
Well,
yeah, concussion, ankle.
If that's the case, but you see where I'm going with this. He's a guy who has the experience in these environments, and I think he's much less likely to take the unnecessary risk that a McCarthy might. So, there was something else. Dre, you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, but. And
this
now
is
I
the
lost
fans.
it.
I brought up how the fans shouldn't show up. There shouldn't be one Iowa fan that shows up at Kinnick without the thought process. There's no way we can win this football game. It absolutely is. And I think one thing is telling is Harbaugh making a comment about, you know, Kinnick is where top 5 teams come to die. The fact that he said that in public tells me that he is sending a direct message to his team behind closed doors that, hey, we can't go in here sleepwalking. You know, we understand what this team historically does at home. And I love that if that's the case, because I want our guys to walk in there.
What I will say is Nick Saban does that a lot as far as sending messages to his team via the media. So who knows? Maybe Harbaugh's taking a page out of Saban's book. Corey, hey man, thanks so much for joining. Definitely appreciate it. Always love being on with you. I'm not sure what Saturday is going to end up like as far as post-game stuff. I know we'll be on the channel. I'm not sure kind of logistics as far as, hopping on. I think you usually on with Coach and stuff like that. So, we'll
have Coach on after the show or after the game on my channel, on the Iowa channel, Mark's Iowa channel. That's what I was going to say to Dre. Just one more parting shot. You said, you find it hard to believe that Iowa could score 2 defensive scores back to back. Just as a reminder, Iowa not only scored pick 6 last week against Rutgers, they had a fumble recovery for a touchdown against Rutgers. They had an interception against Nevada, 2 block punts against Iowa State, and 2 safeties against South Dakota State. So they are whatever anybody thinks is the rule of like logic or just the chances of things, the rules of probability, you kind of throw those out the door with Iowa. They kind of just break those rules on a daily basis. So maybe you're right. Maybe Michigan will play clean, and if they play clean, they'll win this game.
Perfect.
Hey, we're looking forward to it, man.